Welcome to the webinar, Untangling Coordination of Benefits. During this webinar, we will spend most of our time focusing on coordination of benefit claims. Some basic knowledge of claims and remittances is assumed. My name is Sarah Vandermolen. I'm UHIN's corporate trainer, and I'll be your presenter today. We're going to start off today by reviewing a glossary to standardize our understanding of some terminology that's common to coordination of benefits. After that, we'll review some basics about coordination of benefits and why it is what we're doing, which takes us into what is the logic. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to remember what needs to be done if we know why it needs to be done. After that, we'll hit up some important payment elements, things to pay attention to on the explanation of benefits that came from the primary insurance. We'll go through an example of putting together a coordination of benefits claim. And then we'll discuss some considerations about working with paper explanation of benefits and submitting electronic coordination of benefit claims. Near the end, we're going to talk about common errors and how to avoid them. And at the very end, we're going to do a practice run. So we're going to get to do a little bit of a practical example of putting together a coordination of benefits claim. And you'll get to try out some of the concepts that you've learned throughout the rest of this webinar. First up on the glossary, coordination of benefits, or COB. Anytime we reference a COB claim, this is a non-primary claim. So that could include a secondary claim, meaning that the primary payer has paid out and now there's a second insurance involved and you're submitting to the second insurance. It could even be a tertiary, in which there are 3 insurances involved and you're submitting to the third. Now, theoretically, it could also extend beyond 3 insurances, but practically speaking, secondary and tertiary are much more common. When we talk about remittances, we're talking about payment information. Now, remittances are typically sent in one of 2 different methods. The first one listed, explanation of benefit, or EOB, when we use that term throughout this webinar, this is indicating a paper explanation of benefit or a paper remittance. So this is the one that comes through the mail and gives you all of that information about what has been paid and what has not been paid. The electronic version of that is called the 835. So whenever we use 835 throughout this webinar, it is indicating the electronic version specifically. Adjudication means payment processing. It means that a claim has gone through a payer system all the way through, and they have decided what they will pay and what they will not pay. So when a claim has adjudicated, it has finished out that processing cycle. An adjustment is a non-payment amount. So if there is a copay that is taken out of the amount paid back to the provider, because it's assumed that the patient is paying this copay amount, that copay is an adjustment. So anytime I use the word adjustment, just know that is pretty much synonymous with a non-payment. Lastly here, we've got a crossover. A crossover happens when the primary payment has been made and it's time to send the secondary or the coordination of benefits claim to the second payer. And when it happens automatically, this is a very nice thing. Automatic crossovers occur when the primary payer, they finish processing and they know who the second payer is. And so they go ahead and send it directly. Automatic crossovers are a wonderful thing. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. Digging a little bit more into coordination of benefits, I've already mentioned that it can be secondary, it can be tertiary. It's just some insurance billing that does not involve the primary payer. You have to coordinate the benefits across multiple payers. And COB will come into play for you when there is other insurance coverage, but there is no automatic crossover. So if the primary payer is not aware of the secondary payer or they do not have a crossover workflow, then it will be you who will get to submit that COB. One of the things to consider about COB is when you have to cross between electronic and paper. Now what I mean by that is if the primary insurance gives you your payment remittance details on an electronic 835, but then you have to send a paper coordination of benefits or secondary claim, or the opposite where the primary payer gives you a paper explanation of benefits and you have to submit an electronic coordination of benefits or secondary claim. There are some challenges associated, especially with that second scenario. Paper explanation of benefits often do not use standardized codes, whereas electronic transactions of all kinds depend on having everything standardized. So when you have to go from non-standard to standard, well, that's one of the scenarios we're going to have to dig into it a little bit later when we get into the common errors and how to avoid them section. So if you just try to memorize everything regarding coordination of benefits, it's a lot to remember. But if you can come back to the logic of it, that can assist you to keep everything straight. First of all, professional and dental claim adjustments, which remember adjustments are non-payments, they tend to report on the line level. Now when I say on the line level, I'm referring to on the service line. Professional and dental claims mostly are fee-for-service, and so each individual service line could have different codes, could be paid out differently. So that's why when professional and dental claims are adjudicated, those adjustments happen most of the time on the service line. That also means that when you're going to be doing a coordination of benefits claim, you're going to need to report all of that detail on the service line level, because again, it could differ from service line to service line. By contrast, institutional claim adjustments are most often on the claim level. Institutional claims are more likely to bill for bundled services, which means that adjustments are made on a higher up, which means adjustments are made on the claim level rather than on each individual line. So when an institutional coordination of benefits claim is created, for once, the institutional people get a little bit of a break and only have to report claim level adjustments. Now, I should mention that is true most of the time. There are some cases in which institutional claims will report on the line level. If that happens, then in those cases, go ahead and report adjustments and everything on the coordination of benefits claim on the line level as well. It just has to match line level to line level or claim level to claim level. Now, one of the most common complaints that I hear about coordination of benefits is that it's a lot of information, and that is true. But the reason that a lot of information is required is because we need to give the coordination of benefits payer, secondary, tertiary, whatever, the entire picture of what has gone before. So when you're putting together a coordination of benefits claim, maybe ask yourself, have you left anything unaccounted for? Was there a charge in the initial bill that is not mentioned in some form on the coordination of benefits? That could be a problem. Is there a payment from the primary payer or a non-payment from the primary that was not mentioned on the coordination of benefits claim? That sort of thing is giving an incomplete picture to the secondary payer, which means that they won't be able to process that claim. Now, one additional part of that last bullet about keeping track of every cent comes back to a common error called balancing. We'll get into this in more detail later on, but balancing is one of the most common errors that we see, and it has to do with the amounts in the claim not matching up. So stay tuned and we'll come back to that. When the primary insurance has finished adjudication and they've sent you back a remittance, either electronically or on paper, these are some of the main places to keep an eye out for on that remittance, because you're going to need these to build your coordination of benefits claim. First, we have the date of adjudication. This is also known as the check date. It's the date that everything finished processing with the primary payer. Paid amounts. Now, everybody who's building a coordination of benefits claim will at least need the claim paid amount. This is the amount or the total amount paid on that entire claim. Now, professional and dental providers, you will also need any paid amounts for each individual service line. You will also need adjustment codes and the adjustment amounts that are associated with them. So remember, adjustments are non-payments. Adjustment codes are the codes that will indicate a reason for a non-payment or for an adjustment. So keep an eye out for those. You will need those for each claim for institutional providers, and professional and dental will also need that for each line within the claim. This all comes back to the amount of detail that's reported on the remittance. So if they report the payments and the adjustments and the codes on the claim level, You're going to need that for your coordination of benefits. If they report it on the line level, you will need it on the line level for the coordination of benefits. When it's time to put together your coordination of benefits claim, we recommend gathering everything that you're going to need together before you get started. This is kind of like a recipe. You read the entire recipe and get all your ingredients ready to go before you begin cooking. This will make things a lot easier. First of all, you're going to need your primary claim. So if you have a printed copy of it, or if you're using a practice management system that has a saved copy of it, just make sure you know how and where to access it or have a copy of it that you can read. And that's because primary claim information will be sent on to the secondary insurance, again, so they have the complete picture and they know what happened before. You're also going to need the 835 or EOB from the primary payer. Now, we also recommend having a calculator. If you're lucky enough to be a math whiz and you're able to keep all these numbers in your head at once, go for it. But most of us, a calculator is going to be very handy when we start trying to add up all the totals and make sure things balance, aka that we have accounted for all of the different amounts and given the entire picture. The next to last bullet point about COB insurance details, by that I mean the subscriber details. So the secondary insurance subscriber, their subscriber number, the name, birth date, gender, address, all of that information about the secondary insurance, that will be needed. Now, if you are using a paper explanation of benefits or EOB and transferring it into an electronic COB claim, you will also need a list of codes, and I'll show you where to get those a little bit later on in the presentation. But this is part of that going from non-standardized to standardized codes. The first step is to mark the claim as a coordination of benefits claim. Now, the screenshot I've got here is from UHIN's tool, but the same principle applies even if you've got a different practice management system. There should be some way of marking the claim as a coordination of benefits. It might not be a checkbox like this screenshot. It might be a drop-down menu or putting a number into a field. If you have questions about your specific software, please ask your vendor how you can mark a claim as a coordination of benefits. Once you've marked a claim as being coordination of benefits, next we need to set the who and the where. So the destination or the payer that you indicate in the claim needs to be the secondary payer. So if you have a main field where you indicate the destination for the claim, please do make sure it is the secondary payer, not the primary. You will also need to put in some patient and subscriber information. Now, in the main area of the claim, this will need to be the secondary patient and subscriber insurance information, not the primary. So the destination is the one who rules here. Now, when you get to the other insurance area of the claim, that is where you can put in the primary insurance information. Sometimes people find this confusing. If it helps, the other insurance, other payer, other subscriber, other patient, anything marked as other is for a payer you are not currently billing. So when you're billing a secondary, the secondary is in the main areas, primary is in the other areas. Now, if you are using the UHIN software, this tip is especially for you. If you're not using the UHIN software, please disregard this entirely. This will not apply to you. UHIN users, when you are entering the other insured information, this is going to be in box 9, please leave the subscriber's address blank. It's not required and it does cause problems if it's included. So again, box 9, please leave the address information blank. Now at the bottom of box 9, there's also a payer ID number field. And this is where the primary insurance ID goes. If you're not sure what that number is, go ahead and use the link on the screen. You can also get to it by navigating to uhin.org and looking for our payer list under resources. This is another tip just for UHIN users. However, this one is specific to institutional claim users. If you are submitting an institutional coordination of benefits claim, in the other insured subscriber ID, please make sure to select member identification from the drop-down, and you're going to enter the primary member ID below that. In the next box underneath, it will say Other Subscriber Secondary Information. For this one, although you're selecting insurance policy number from the drop-down, please enter the same primary member ID in the box below. So that primary member ID will go in twice. As a note, in the other payer ID field in this form, do not include any dashes or spaces in the payer identifier. That is something that can cause problems. All right, back to more general information. Somewhere in your claim, you're going to need to have primary release information. Now, release information is the section that indicates you have all of the required signatures and authorizations to do the billing. In UHIN, as you can see from the screenshot, the destination payer fields are already filled out. However, there are other payer release boxes below that, and those do need to be selected. The idea is that when you're sending a claim off to the secondary insurance, they need to know that you've got all of the correct release information from the patient, but they also need to know that you had the correct release information when you submitted to the primary insurance. This is part of recreating what was sent to the primary and giving the secondary insurance the whole picture. Step 4. This is where we start to enter primary claim information in earnest. Now, this does need to be the exact same information that we sent to the primary insurance. Same diagnoses, same service lines and amounts, same patient account number, everything. Now we get into entering the information from the primary insurance A35 or EOB. Remember, one more time, on institutional claims, most likely you're going to be reporting everything on the claim level. Professional and dental, we're going all the way down to the line level details. Now, this is again where we're going to make sure it balances, and I do keep coming back to that, I know, but it is because it is one of the biggest errors that we see, and with a little bit of checking, it is completely preventable. For those of you doing line level reporting, this means that all of your different service line numbers need to balance with your claim totals, and both your line and your claim totals need to balance with your primary claim information. So if you billed $100 to the primary payer, you need to have $100 worth of payments and non-payments put together on that coordination of benefits claim, so that the secondary payer can see that you have accounted for every cent. Because balancing is so important, I'm actually going to run through an example. We have one primary claim listed on the left, in which there were two different service lines, $100 on the first, $50 on the second, with a total billed of $150. In this example, when the adjustments and payments were entered on the COB claim, for line 1, the primary payer paid $50. There was a $25 copay and a write-off of $25. So if we add all of those together, $50 plus 25 plus 25, we do get $100 from the line 1 that was billed to the primary claim. So far, so good. Line 2 was paid $25. However, that does not match up with the $50 that was up above. So there's some paid or non-payment amount that has not been reported. That means that my totals are off, and this one does not balance. On the right now, I've got a copy of this claim that does balance. So primary information is the same. In the COB claim, the line 1 is the same, but line 2 has something new. I still show that the primary payer paid $25, but now I also show a write-off of $25. And that now means that my total billed amounts do add up, and that means this claim balances. Now, with that in mind, let's move on to entering some details on a professional claim. On the claim level for a professional claim, the only thing we want to report is the primary payer paid. This is the total amount that the primary payer paid for that whole claim. The reason we're only putting that one piece of information on the claim level is because everything else is going to be reported on the line level. Now, just in case you're curious, putting in too much information on the claim level can cause a rejection. In fact, as a general rule, putting in too much information is often just as bad as putting in too little. So only put in the amount of detail that's asked for, but no more. On the line level, that's where we get to go crazy with all the detail. So this is where we're going to add the line adjudication date. Now, the line adjudication date is pretty much going to be the same thing as the check date or the claim adjudication date that came back on that EOB or 835. The only time that you'll see different line adjudication dates on different service lines is pretty much if you're mixing and matching different EOBs and 835s on the same COB claim. That can get fairly messy and it's a little harder to keep track of, so I don't necessarily recommend it, but it is possible. Once you've put in the date that that particular service line was paid or not paid, it was adjudicated, then we get to put in how much was paid. Whether it's $0 or the entire amount for that service line, you get to put in what the primary payer has paid out on it. We also get to put in the procedure code and, if applicable, modifiers. Again, recreating what was in the original service line. Then we get to put in line adjustment codes and amounts, and I'm going to go into that in a little more detail on the next slide. When you're putting in line level adjustments and adjustment codes, they're going to be grouped into categories. For UHIN users, to add in these adjustments, you're going to click on the edit buttons on the left, and that will bring up the pop-up that's shown on the right. Now, the first category that I'm dealing with, or the first group, is patient responsibility. So this is where I'm going to put all of my patient responsibility related adjustments. Now, the one I've got up there currently has a reason code of 3 and a 25 monetary amount. What that translates to, and remember I'm pulling this off of an EOB or an 835, it means that there was a copay, that is the 3, and it was $25. So this was a non-payment or an adjustment of $25 for the reason of copay. If I also had a coinsurance or a deductible type of non-payment, which would also fall into that patient responsibility category, then I would list those in the same pop-up. And if you have a practice management system, it could look different, but it's going to be the same concept. You're going to want to have everything grouped together under each type of category. That can be important because if you try to have each individual code in its own separate place instead of grouped together, then it can actually cause rejections. If anyone out there has a practice management system or you're using UHIN and you're having trouble getting your coordination of benefit claims through, especially if you have a lot of adjustments that you're trying to report and you know you're not grouping, this is something to pay attention to. So we're assuming that we're putting all of the patient responsibility codes in on this pop-up. Once I'm done, then I'm going to go into the next edit button. Again, this is specific to UHIN, but there should be some way to add another group of adjustments on practice management systems. And perhaps this is where I put my contractual obligation codes. So in this example, the 45 indicates that it's above the agreed amount contractually, and that adjustment was also $25. If there were other types of contractual obligation adjustments, like an adjustment for not medically necessary or some other type of contractual write-off, then this could go in the same category or group. This is a tip specific to UHIN users again. When you are entering service lines, to begin the first service line, you're going to need to enter a 1 in the service line number, and then hit your tab key and you can continue to enter in information. If you have additional service lines, you would repeat that same step, but first you would need to change the service line number to a 2. So you would highlight service line number 1, erase it, enter the next one, and then hit your tab key. And that will blank out the information below so that you have room to enter the line 2 information. Now I know it looks like it's erasing your previous information. It's not, it's just hiding it so that it doesn't take up a huge amount of room on the claim screen. If you were to erase the 2, put in a 1 and hit tab, you would get all of your first line information back. For institutional claims, when you're entering COB, again on the claim level, you're going to need your claim adjudication date, the primary paid amount. Now in UHIN specifically, that field is the COB payer prior payment. That is where you'll enter the primary paid amount. And then you'll need all of your adjustment codes and amounts. And hopefully you did not get a COB with any line level information and you can just stay on the claim level. When you do have a paper EOB, and we're going from non-standard paper EOB codes to an electronic COB claim, which does require standard codes, this is the part where we need a little bit of translation. Hopefully there are some cases in which payers are using standard codes even on paper EOBs, but it's not a guarantee. Those are not regulated. So a PR3, like in my example before, on a standardized code set, that will always mean a copay that's a patient responsibility. Always, always. It's part of the code set. However, on a paper EOB, it does not necessarily mean that. Hopefully it does, but if it doesn't, here are some questions that you can go through to determine what the standard code would be. And then you could enter the standard code into your electronic COB claim, and that will make it through the system. So we're going to go through these questions in order, and if you are able to answer yes to one of these questions, then you can stop there and that's your answer. If, however, the answer is no to a question, then just move on down to the next one. First up, we have, can you bill the patient for the non-payment amount? So if through your contractual relationship with the payer, or because you don't have a contractual relationship, you are allowed to bill the patient, then your code, your group code, is probably PR for patient responsibility. If that's not your scenario, then we'll move on to the next question. Does the non-payment fall under your contract with the payer? So does your contractual relationship with the payer require you to accept that non-payment as a write-off? If that's the case, you're probably looking at a CO for contractual obligations. If that's not it, did the payer reduce the payment, but you aren't bound by contract to accept the write-off? Now this one is not as common, but if you get one of these, that is probably PI for payer-initiated reduction. And basically, this is something where they are encouraging you to take the write-off, but they don't have a contractual relationship that would allow them to enforce that. If it's not any of the above, it's probably going to be this last one, which is it a correction, reversal, or just something outside the other categories? If that's the case, it's probably OA for other adjustment. Now, assuming that we found the category or group code, now we need to find the specific reason code. To do that, I'm going to use the link that's referenced here. This is for wpc-edi.com. They maintain a code list on their website. It's free for use, and it's a fantastic resource, and I encourage you all to bookmark it. This is the code list. It's a very long list, so I don't recommend printing it out. However, it is an excellent list to keep as a bookmark. And then if you need to search it, you can actually use the electronic search, which is Control F for find. Now, if you have a code and you need to know the meaning of it, you could enter the code into the search and it would pull up the explanation. However, in our scenario, we're going to need to do the exact opposite. We're starting with a meaning, but we don't know the exact code. So we're going to need to do a search by keyword. Now the first keyword I'm going to use is based on a non-payment or an adjustment for timely filing. Maybe the claim took too long to go through processing, I didn't submit it in time, and I got a timely filing rejection. Now this isn't something that's likely to happen for coordination of benefits, because if it's a timely filing error, I probably can't submit secondary, but it's a very good example for another reason. I'm going to start off by using the word timely as my keyword. Now I have 3 results, so I'm going to need to go through each one and see if it looks correct. The first one I've got says, attachment or other documentation referenced on the claim was not received in a timely fashion. Well, that's not really it. I'm looking for something that describes the entire claim being rejected for not having been timely filed. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Payment adjusted because pre-certification authorization not received. Still not it. So I'm going to do one more here. Information requested from the billing or rendering provider was not provided or not provided timely. Still not it. So this actually is the reason that I picked this phrase. Sometimes when you're searching for a keyword and you're not finding what you're looking for, the important thing is to make your keyword less specific. So if I were to adjust my keyword, instead of saying timely, I just search for the word time, The very first thing that comes up is the time limit for filing has expired, and that is the one that I would use. Since this is not the sort of thing I could bill the patient for in most cases, but it's a contractual type of write-off, my group code is probably CO for contractual obligations, and now I know that my reason code would be 29. Now for a different example, I'm going to use the scenario of having had an adjustment for the procedure not being medically necessary. Medical necessity is kind of a big buzzword right now, and more payers are moving to a quality-based payment program where they're really focused on making sure that patients are getting only medically necessary treatments. So you may see more and more of these as time goes on. Now, I could try searching for the word medical. I have a feeling, though, that medical is going to show up a lot in a code list like this. So maybe it's better if I search for the word necessity. The first one that comes up is these are non-covered services because this is not deemed a medical necessity by the payer. This seems like a very fair code, so I would probably use CO again for contractual obligations, and I would use the reason code of 50. One thing I would recommend is if you are having to translate a non-standard code into a standard code like this, keep all of your documentation. Keep the original EOB and keep a copy of the codes that you thought were the best translation so that if anybody ever asks, you can show what you did and why you did it. This brings us into the common errors section. As I've mentioned many times, the most common error is that the claim does not balance. And we've talked a little bit about what it means to have the claim balance, and we'll do an example in just a little bit that will allow you some practical experience. Also, too much information. I mentioned this briefly at the beginning of the professional section, in which if you put too much information on the claim level, rather than in the line where they're looking for it, that can cause a rejection. Primary and secondary disagreement is when it's unclear which payer is primary and which one is secondary. Unfortunately, this isn't something you can always avoid, but there are some things you can do to reduce the number of times you have to deal with this. First of all, try to make sure that the patient is clear. Ask them questions if there's any doubt as to who is primary and who is secondary. I know that a fair number of primary and secondary disagreements happen in divorce cases. Within a divorce situation, ask the subscriber if there's something in the divorce decree that indicates which insurance is primary and which one is secondary. If it's mentioned in the divorce decree, that takes precedence. The next rule is supposed to be the birthday rule. This means that out of the two subscribers, the one whose birthday falls closer to the beginning of the calendar year, that insurance would be primary. If it's some other type of disagreement that's not easily solved, or if the payers themselves are arguing about who is primary, whenever you talk to someone about this, just always document what you're being told and who is telling you. Especially if different parties in the same company are telling you different things, definitely document which number you called and who you talked to and what that person told you. And that'll make it a little bit easier to find the real information, and if there's any misinformation issue, it'll help that organization with fixing it. The last common error listed here is billing too soon, or 30 days from primary adjudication. Now, it doesn't seem like billing soon should be a bad thing. However, this links back to the automatic crossovers. When a primary payer automatically crosses over a COB claim to the secondary payer has everything they need already. If the provider is sending another COB claim as well, it's just considered a duplicate. Now, that's not a big deal on an individual basis, but if enough people are doing that, it can actually cause a couple of issues and gum up the works for that secondary payer. They're getting hit from all sides by these claims. So there are a few payers, and possibly more in the future, that have instituted a rejection policy that if they get a COB claim within 30 days from that primary adjudication date, they are going to reject it and wait until those 30 days are up. If they get an automatic crossover, they will process it based on that. If they don't get an automatic crossover, well, they've given the primary payer enough time, so we're pretty sure they're not going to send one, and now you can send your COB and it won't be a duplicate. So for your workflow, wait those 30 days after the primary adjudication date and see if there's any hint of processing on the secondary payer side. If there's not, once those 30 days have passed, you're all clear to send that COB claim. At this point, we're going to go into that practice run that I've been promising. What I have here is a screenshot of a typically messy EOB. It has a lot of information packed into a very small area. It has 3 service lines, 1, 2, and 3, and claim totals down at the bottom. It has some column headers. We've got billed, allowed, deductible, co-insurance, and provider paid. And we have some adjustment codes. We have some CO45, PR96, a couple of non-payments in there to look at. So what I would ask is that you pause the recording and try to identify all of the different areas from this EOB that you would need to report on a coordination of benefits claim. My tip is to find the line level billed amounts and then look for all of the payments and adjustment amounts that will add up to each billed amount. Go ahead and pause the recording and press play when you're ready to continue. Let's take a look at the results from your practice run. For the first line, the billed amount was $149. There were 3 adjustments in total. There was a deductible, which was listed in a column rather than as a code. There was a co-insurance, also listed in a column, and then an adjustment listed with the actual code. Those 3 adjustments added up to the paid amount do equal the $149. In a real scenario, you would have had to do that translation from earlier that involved looking up the PR1 and the PR2 for the deductible and co-insurance. On the second line, we have a billed amount of $50, 1 adjustment of $50, and a paid amount of 0. This adds up to the line 2 billed amount. On line 3, the billed amount was $89. There was a co-insurance in one of the columns, an adjustment code, and a paid amount. All of these lines put together added up to the claim total of $288. A coordination of benefits claim that reported all of these adjustments and payment amounts would have balanced. If you have questions about this coordination of benefits recording, please reach out. UHIN has an excellent customer service team with a lot of electronic experience, and we'd be happy to answer questions about the process of putting together a coordination of benefits claim. My personal contact information is also listed. I am UHIN's corporate trainer, and I'm happy to schedule individual training with anyone who needs them. Thank you for your time, and we hope that you enjoyed this.